A big boss must have a vision. We will become the people's silent partner. Every time some citizen buys a pound of hamburger, we get a nickel. Every time some guy gets a haircut, we get a dime. Together, we will own this town.
A detective in the 1930s takes on an organized crime syndicate and finds himself in the crosshairs. This week, we discuss a really stupid catchphrase, what Dustin Hoffman would sound like as the Aflac duck, and a pretty aggressive move by an orphan who really wants to get adopted. We also talk about the comic strip movie we'd love to see before finding out if 1990's Dick Tracy stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time recording during the pandemic.
Why do you keep reminding everyone that we're recording during the pandemic? I think people know. This is Alan Noah. Welcome to the show. And today we are going to talk about Dick Tracy, which was the big summer blockbuster movie of 1990. It came out 30 years ago. The interesting thing about this movie is that it's based on a comic strip, not a comic book. Comic book movies are all the rage now, and they have been coming out pretty steadily on and off for decades now. But comic strip movies are pretty rare. And I was looking it up. There's only a handful of comic strip movies that I knew about. One of the first ones I saw was The Addams Family. I didn't know that was a comic strip. I knew that was a 60s TV show, but I didn't know that was based on a comic strip originally.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's weird, right? Garfield, I know. Popeye, Dennis the Menace, Peanuts, that had a big screen adaptation a few years back. Flash Gordon, The Phantom, and Marmaduke, which I totally forgot was one of those live action CGI movies. I think that's what it was.
Being the son of a Parisian, Tintin, it was originally a comic strip, and then they were put into little books. And actually, if you ever open up any of the books, you'll see that the bottom panel, the bottom right panel, is always some kind of cliffhanger. Like he looks beyond something, and there's a huge exclamation point. They used to get one page at a time. My father said that he would get what was called Tintin magazine, and there'd be one page of Tintin, and then one page of another very famous one called Asterix and Obelix. You never heard of that one, have you, Al?
I've never heard of any of these things that you're talking about.
To any of our international listeners, they know exactly who these things are.
How many of these movies have you seen?
I saw Dennis the Menace. I believe I saw that in the theaters one summer at camp when it was a rainy day. I had seen Flash Gordon. I've seen that one. I've actually never seen The Addams Family.
Really?
Yeah, I've never seen that one. I think as a kid, I remember seeing Popeye. That's Robin Williams, right?
Yes, I don't know that I've seen that one.
Yeah, I didn't see the Peanuts movie. I've never seen any of the Garfield movies, Marmaduke or The Phantom. I've never seen any of those, no.
You know, it's funny. I've been reading some Calvin and Hobbes to my son during quarantine. And at one point he was like, why isn't there a Calvin and Hobbes movie? How come they never made one? Bill Watterson is notoriously anti-merchandising and franchising. And anytime you see the sticker or the t-shirt of Calvin peeing on something, that's all unofficial, and he didn't want to license anything. Even still, though, it is kind of crazy that at no point, no company backed a dump truck of cash up to his house and was like, come on, a Calvin and Hobbes show. It's crazy that Netflix hasn't done that, or Amazon Prime hasn't been able to just give him enough money to do, an animated show. It's crazy. I'd watch that.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes is just something that he just didn't want to merchandise. And, I'll bet you he's doing perfectly fine for himself. And if you're the kind of person that has a house that you own and you have all the food you'll ever need and electricity, water, and basic amenities, and you also have 26 books that are regularly selling, you probably don't need to have more money if you're a certain kind of person. I could see that.
Yeah. I would enjoy it. I would totally be into a Calvin and Hobbes movie or Netflix show or whatever.
Yeah, but I could see someone really not getting the Calvin and Hobbes and making it more of like a Bart Simpson kind of thing. Because remember, Calvin and Hobbes, the only thing that a lot of people have ever seen of Calvin and Hobbes is this bad boy. And he's a little mischievous, but he's really a sweet boy. I mean, he teases, what's her name, Susie?
Yeah.
But she always like wins, doesn't she?
Mostly. I mean, she gets her revenge too. I mean, in the comic strip, he never ever pees on Ford or GM logos or anything, really.
Yeah.
But we never got a Calvin and Hobbes movie, but we did get a Dick Tracy movie. So to refresh your memory on this movie, it stars Warren Beatty as Dick Tracy. Beatty also produced and directed the film. And Dick Tracy is a 1930s detective trying to take down Big Boy Caprice, the city's most dangerous crime boss. Which city? I don't think they ever say, but a city. A ballroom singer named Breathless Mahoney, who's played by Madonna, is a witness to Big Boy's crimes. She's hesitant to testify, but she gets in between Tracy and his girlfriend Tess. There's also a mysterious new player who doesn't have a face who tries to get Tracy out of the picture. In the end, Dick Tracy beats the bad guys, saves Tess, and the two of them wind up taking care of a young orphan boy too. So we talked about this a little bit at the end of last week's episode, that this was the movie of 1990. This was supposed to be the big summer blockbuster. I remember seeing it in the theater. I don't think I've seen it since then. I don't believe it was the big blockbuster that everyone hoped it would be, right?
You know, this film was the first time I learned about hype. And you're right and you're not so right. Dick Tracy was not the enormous blockbuster it was meant to be, but I'm pretty sure it did pretty well for itself. It was released on June 15th, 1990. It had a $47 million budget. It wound up making $103 million domestically and $162 million worldwide. It tripled its budget, and the kind of rough estimate is 2.5 times the budget is profit, but they didn't make a sequel, and it did wind up being number 9 on the domestic list of 1990. We have not seen number 1, but we have seen number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 6, number 9. So number 2 it was our first double feature that we ever did.
Pretty Woman?
Correct. Yes. Number 3 stars, my guess is going to be the most successful child actor of all time.
Home Alone?
Correct. Number 4 had characters that love pizza.
Oh, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Right. Number 6 is a very interesting one. The last frame of the movie, we wonder, did this film happen or was it all a dream in his mind?
Oh, Total Recall.
Correct. Yes, very nice. And number 9 was Dick Tracy. So the only ones we're missing there is number 1 is probably the sexiest film ever about pottery.
Oh, Ghost.
Right.
We'll do Ghost. We'll get to Ghost.
Yeah. So this film, it didn't spawn the sequels that you kind of maybe expected it to.
And that Warren Beatty wanted to make. He wanted to make sequels, and he's been talking about it recently. He's been talking about how he wanted to do a sequel and how he still could, maybe not recently, but in the 2000s, he was quoted as hoping to do a sequel. And I don't know that there's much of a thirst for that, really, but okay. It was basically an issue of rights, and he bought the rights from the Tribune Media Company, and then it went back, and there was this whole lawsuit. I kind of started reading about the back and forth of this lawsuit, and my eyes started glazing over. It was pretty boring, but I think that sort of slowed things down.
Well, that being said, he certainly wanted this to be another huge franchise because you had to notice it right when this film opened up. What did you notice? Right? What did you hear?
Oh, well, I mean, you hear the score. It definitely sounds like Danny Elfman. It specifically sounds like the Batman theme, maybe a little bit like the Pee-wee's Big Adventure theme.
I mean, it is Danny Elfman.
Yes, and he has that style that I think is recognizable, at least if you do a podcast about 80s and 90s movies and you hear a lot of his stuff.
It was really a literal depiction of a comic strip on film. And these colors are what I describe as, the old school Technicolor. I mean, it's a lot of bright colors and ridiculous colors, almost like the Batman 1960s outfits that the villains would wear.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very colorful. There's a lot of red, yellow, green everywhere. I mean, also blue and purple and other colors too. But it definitely seems like every character has like his own color, maybe colors. Dick Tracy wears a lot of yellow, but there's also some red in there, and his whole apartment is yellow and red. And there's just a lot of symbolism with the colors everywhere. It's very, very deliberate. It's really easy to spot. Also, the backgrounds are all paintings. They're all matte paintings. And sometimes it seems like in a lot of older movies, you're not supposed to know that the paintings are paintings. But here, it almost seems like they want you to know that every background is a painting.
He's trying to put you into a comic. I have no doubt that that's how Warren Beatty sold himself being the director, by trying to say that was his vision.
And the movie starts with this little orphan kid who kind of just wanders into some gangsters playing poker. And these people look very, very bizarre. They have a lot of wrinkles in their faces. One guy has this huge, massive head, but like a tiny little face in the head. And then all of these bad guys are killed by two other bad guys, Flat Top and Itchy. I don't know that they ever say that those are their names, at least Itchy. I mean, I know that from looking it up on Wikipedia. But anyway, the kid runs away, and this kid then later bumps into Dick Tracy. The kid looked kind of familiar to me, and he was in Hook. He was Peter Pan's son.
Yeah, the actor's name is Charlie Korsmo. He was also in Can't Hardly Wait. He's the nerd that they kind of, all the bullies make fun of. I read up about him. He wound up graduating with a degree from MIT, and then he got his law degree from Yale Law School. And then in 2011, President Obama appointed him the Board of Trustees to the Barry Goldwater Scholarship and Excellence in Education Foundation.
Oh, the BGSEEF?
Yeah, the BGSEEF.
Whoa.
And actually, I remember reading when we were doing Hook that Spielberg really liked this kid. He probably saw something in him, and obviously, he grew up to be successful. And he really wanted him to be cast as the kid in Jurassic Park. But then they decided to flip the genders from the novel, and the kid wound up being a younger version, and he was too old for it. But Macaulay Culkin was apparently also considered for the role of the kid in Dick Tracy, but he turned this down so that he could do another film in 1990, which we already mentioned, Home Alone. So I'd say both of them wound up being successful, but Macaulay Culkin did the better choice in 1990.
Yeah, but only one of those two got the BGSEEF, so there you go.
But one of them dated Mila Kunis for 7 years.
Very good point. So basically what's going on in the movie is there's this whole underworld plot where one gangster who is called Big Boy Caprice and is played by Al Pacino, who I completely forgot was in this movie. He's on a mission to get rid of all the other gangsters, which is why they killed all those guys at the poker game at the beginning. And he kills this guy named Lips and steals his nightclub. He gives him a cement overcoat, which in this movie they call the bath, which is basically just putting somebody in a box and pouring concrete over their head. And he takes this guy's club and his girlfriend, a woman named Breathless Mahoney, who is played by Madonna, who, of course, we last saw in A League of Their Own.
Yeah, this cast is insane. Well, as the Danny Elfman score was going, you just saw the cast, and it's a shame that they put the cast here because, or maybe you had to because you might not recognize him under the makeup here, but this cast is Warren Beatty, Madonna, Al Pacino, you got Dustin Hoffman, Kathy Bates, James Caan, the guy you're talking about Lips, that's Paul Sorvino, you've got Mandy Patinkin, from Homeland, if you watch that show.
And The Princess Bride.
And The Princess Bride, of course. It's an insane cast.
Yeah, it is. And some of these actors have very small roles. I mean, Paul Sorvino is a very talented actor. He's killed off in one scene.
Yeah, but this is also directed and produced by Warren Beatty. So this is like, it's a phone call, And this is the huge Disney film, or what is it, Buena Vista, Touchstone, whichever one of those it was.
It was released under Touchstone.
This wound up being all the big boys hanging out, and then, once they get, it was either Pacino or Hoffman or one or both, then everyone starts coming in, and, it's a paid vacation to wherever they were on the set. You know how fun that day on the set was when everyone was there hanging out, talking to Warren, and it's probably a fantastic time.
Oh, I'm sure. And Dustin Hoffman plays Mumbles, and Dick Tracy finds out what's going on, and he interrogates Mumbles, and he basically just mumbles his way through the interrogation.
I love Dustin Hoffman's character, and Mumbles, he just talks like this. And I read that Gilbert Gottfried was actually almost cast in the role of Mumbles, and because he has a distinctive voice as well. He had this quote that says, "The only way our names, Dustin Hoffman and Gilbert Gottfried, would ever appear together in the same Hollywood conversation would be in the sentence, 'I've seen Gilbert Gottfried's acting, and he's no Dustin Hoffman.'" I mean, it's just so interesting. Like, the role was either Dustin Hoffman or Gilbert Gottfried.
I mean, Dustin Hoffman was almost cast as the Aflac duck. Not a lot of people know that because I just made it up.
I mean, it would be more like Aflac.
I mean, I'd get insurance from that duck. But then Dick Tracy goes directly to Caprice and arrests him, even though he doesn't really have any evidence. And he knows right away that Breathless was at the murder scene of Lips because at the murder, he found one of her earrings. So right away, he knows that she is connected and she could be a witness. Tracy tries to get Breathless to testify, but all she wants to do is flirt with Dick Tracy.
I think it's safe to say that this is released at the peak of Madonna's fame. And, she's known for being sexually very out there. She had a book called Sex, and there's a line when Dick Tracy is saying that he could bring her downtown to interrogate her, and he goes, "I can make you sweat it out under the lights." And she gets up real close and says, "I sweat a lot better in the dark." And there's another scene where she's basically wearing just fishnet stockings from her feet to her neck.
I don't think those would still count as stockings then, right?
I was kind of like, wait, this is like a PG-13 film. I'm pretty sure this is a kid's film. It was well known that Warren Beatty was together with Madonna at this time. So these two are definitely lovers in real life and on film. Well, actually, they're not on film.
No. Breathless keeps trying to seduce Tracy, but to no avail. Meanwhile, this kid who is a witness to the murders at the poker game, he runs into Dick Tracy literally, like as he's running out of a diner and after he stole some guy's watch. And then Dick Tracy beats up the old guy who's hustling him or kind of maybe giving him scraps of food or whatever. And then Dick Tracy and his girlfriend Tess kind of wind up basically being this kid's caregiver. And throughout the movie, they take care of him. They start getting him clothes. There's a montage where he just keeps on asking, "When do we eat? When do we eat? When do we eat?" And it's kind of funny. You also get that, like, he's probably starving and hasn't really ever eaten that much before. So that's why he wants to eat all the time. But I think the kid is mostly there just so that there is a kid in the movie for the kids who are going to watch the movie, someone they can relate to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I do not think the montage of him saying, "When do we eat? When do we eat? When do we eat?" I think it was supposed to be funny, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the theater people were laughing because it's just kind of the thing you might laugh at, but it's not funny and it goes on too long. But that being said, I do like the chemistry between the three of them.
Yeah, it's like a makeshift family, sort of.
Yeah. And so, you have this trope that you see a lot in organized crime films, and that is where one big boss gets all the other bosses together and decides, let's unify, because if we unify, we can control this city. And we have reviewed a film just like this. It's a film from the 70s. Come out and play.
The Warriors.
Right. The plot of that, if you remember, was that one of the gangs was deciding, like, there's more of us than there are the cops. Like, we could control this city. And that's exactly what Big Boy's saying here. You've seen this in a lot of films. And one of the guys decides, I don't want to play. It's exactly the same thing that happens in The Dark Knight when the Joker says, we're going to unite everyone. And one person says, I don't want in. And he calmly says, okay, that's your choice. And Caprice does basically the same thing that the Joker does. He lets them go to his car and then blows up the car.
And that gangster is James Caan. Again, another big name A-list actor that's literally in one scene of this movie. He's not unrecognizable, but he's definitely in like a lot of prosthetics and makeup. And if you didn't know that was James Caan, it could slip by you.
Oh, it slipped by me. I did not notice most of the famous people, and I saw the credits. I did not pick up that Lips was Paul Sorvino. I didn't pick up that this is James Caan. I definitely picked up Dustin Hoffman and Al Pacino. I mean, Al Pacino, Big Boy Caprice is Al Pacino.
Apparently, the look of Caprice is very different from in the comic strip where he was like morbidly obese. And Pacino kind of plays him more just like slouched and hunched, but he's doing the Al Pacino ranting and raving. And why isn't everybody killing who I want to be killed?
Well, that's more of a Jerry Lewis, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, fine. I don't do a great Pacino impression. Sue me.
Hooah! And
there you go.
We got to get one in there. This is also when we're introduced to a mysterious character that the movie calls the Blank, and it's a character that has a completely blank face.
Do they actually ever say the words "the Blank" in this movie? I only saw it like while looking it up on IMDb and Wikipedia.
Yeah, I agree with you, but we don't know who this character is. And did you immediately think that this voice sounded like anything else that you might recognize, Al?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sounds a lot like Boosh.
Who the hell is Boosh?
You are the worst Star Wars nerd literally ever.
Oh, so I know who it is. Oh, so obvious. Oh. Go ahead. By context, I know who Boosh is, but go ahead.
That's the name of the bounty hunter that Leia dresses up as in Return of the Jedi.
It's the one that sounds like, you've been in hibernation sickness. You're in Jabba's palace. That's exactly how this Blank speaks. I think it's exactly the same voice modification.
Right. And the Blank's plan is to get rid of Tracy by having 88 Keys, the piano player at the club that Big Boy stole from Lips. Basically, the piano player becomes like this go-between between the Blank and Caprice, and the offer is the Blank will get rid of Dick Tracy for 10% of everything. And at first, Caprice doesn't want to do that, but Caprice is having a hard time getting rid of Dick Tracy on his own. At one point, he tries to bribe Dick Tracy, and Dick Tracy obviously says no because he is a good, upstanding, moral character. And he ties him up and rigs like a boiler to blow up. And the whole thing is it has to look like an accident because if he kills him, then the police will know that it was Caprice. But it's like, how is this going to look like an accident? You tied him up to a chair where a boiler exploded. I think that's going to make it not look like an accident.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense at all.
No. But the really smart thing that Dick Tracy does is he puts a bug into the club. And by bug, I mean, like a hidden microphone. And so he knows what Caprice is going to do before he does it. So even though he can't seem to get any dirt on Caprice himself, he's able to shut down this whole organized crime syndicate. Until Caprice finds out about the bug. And this part of the movie I found to be really confusing because the cop who's monitoring their conversations and is listening in through the microphone is apparently like upstairs in the club. Like there's like a secret room above Caprice's like meeting room. But I didn't understand that because in this movie, all of the cops and good guys wear these walkie-talkie watches. So clearly there's wireless transmitting technology in this world, even though it's 1930s. Why does this guy have to be hidden in a room in the club? How does he get out? How does he eat? How does he get food? How does he go to the bathroom? How does he communicate back to the other cops?
It's an incredibly lazy piece of writing because they had to figure out a way that this guy spills his coffee and then, they find the bug. There's a billion ways this guy could have been sitting in a van or, somewhere else. Maybe they didn't want to go wireless because I think the thing is only Dick Tracy has a wireless walkie-talkie thing. So that's very special for him. But even if he was somewhere else and it's wired, like he's directly above them. I didn't even need a bug. Just put a hole in the ceiling and listen. It's just a silly thing. But even if they spilled coffee on the microphone, have it had some feedback or something that, maybe not is realistic, but a Hollywood movie you believe, oh, okay, it made a screech and, they can find it. But I instantly noticed that too. And I'm like, why the hell is coffee dripping from the bug? It made no sense.
And then the next scene is also confusing, I thought, because once Big Boy discovers the microphone, his plan is to set a trap for Tracy. And they say, we're going to be at the warehouse tonight at 11 o'clock for our big secret illegal thing, knowing that Dick Tracy will show up. And the thing that they're doing at the warehouse is they're killing the cop who is listening in on their conversation, which bad thing to do if you know the cops are going to show up is to do an attempted murder on another cop. But then in that scene, they start pouring the concrete on that cop who is listening in. And then Dick Tracy pulls a switcheroo where he moves that guy out of the way and he's getting the concrete poured on him so he can surprise the bad guys and shoot them. But why would you on purpose put yourself under concrete to shoot bad guys? There had to be another hiding place.
And also, we don't really ever see when this switch happens. And I think a lot of these confusing things that you find throughout this film come from the fact that I found out that director Warren Beatty, his original cut was 2 hours and 15 minutes. And this film is a very lean hour 41. So they cut out 34 minutes of this film. They certainly cut out entire scenes, but they probably also shaved off a couple establishing shots that made a couple things make more sense. And we were even saying, this whole wireless technology, they never once say that Dick Tracy is the only one with this cool walkie-talkie watch. And did you know that that was a Dick Tracy thing, or were you just saying that he had some weird walkie-talkie watch?
The way I remember it is that when we were going to see the Dick Tracy movie, my mom or my dad or some other adults who were familiar with Dick Tracy were like, oh, the guy with the watch. That was all they knew about him. So I think they mentioned that oh yeah, Dick Tracy has a watch that he can talk into, a watch phone, a watch walkie-talkie. I only knew it secondhand.
Dick Tracy was essentially, that was his major superpower, if you will. And they really don't accentuate that a lot in this film. It's barely used at all. Once in the diner, they're calling Dick Tracy, which I think is his calling card too. That's the whole test of time thing. I'm vaguely remembering this because I, like you, have not seen this film in 30 years. I saw it once in the theater, and I'm recalling what I do remember because I was hyped up about this film. And I vaguely remember that I was even watching some Dick Tracy cartoons, in the afternoon that they were showing because they might have been old ones, and they were always calling him on his watch. So that was his big thing.
It is a stupid catchphrase if that's the show's catchphrase and it's not even from that character. It's someone else saying, calling Dick Tracy. But from here in the movie, the blank really starts aggressively planning to get rid of Dick Tracy. Tracy and Tess get into a fight and she leaves and she goes to stay with her mother. And there's like this whole thing in the beginning of the movie about how Dick Tracy will never take a desk job and he doesn't want to be chief of police because he's never going to be stuck behind no desk. Meanwhile, you see him behind a desk an awful lot. When Tess is talking to her mom, the mom says like, oh, he'll just never take a desk job. And then it immediately cuts to Dick Tracy sitting behind his desk, which I don't know if that was an intentional smash cut, but it just kind of seemed like that. But anyway, the blank lures Dick Tracy to Tess's house, kidnaps Tess, puts Tess in Caprice's club. So it looks like Caprice kidnapped Tess, but he didn't. So the blank is framing Caprice while also setting Tracy up to go in there, basically trying to set up both of them. And it's a little convoluted as I'm explaining it. It was a little convoluted watching it. I can only imagine that 10-year-old Alan watching this movie was incredibly confused, but kind of just went along with it because eventually there's a big, huge gunfight and it's really exciting.
I agree with everything you just said, and I think that 10-year-old James thought the exact same thing. Yeah, so in the midst of this big cop shootout, and I will say it was kind of fun seeing a Tommy gun come out, and you do get to see this iconic Dick Tracy silhouette of him in his yellow trench coat holding that Tommy gun. And they're shooting everything out, and in the midst of this, Big Boy and Tess, he grabs Tess, and they escape in this escape tunnel. And Dick Tracy starts following them, but then when his route is blocked, he just goes, like, no, I know where to go. And for some reason, he knows exactly where this escape tunnel comes out of. And it makes absolutely no sense. But this is something almost definitely was cut out of the original cut of the film, where it's established that he saw where this escape tunnel comes out. But like he saw Flat Top come out earlier or something. And he winds up meeting up with the two of them, and it's near one of these drawbridges. The fight doesn't take place on the drawbridge, which I thought it was going to take place. It takes place in like the gear room that's like next to the drawbridge.
Right. And Caprice does that old time villain thing where he ties Tess to the gears so that she'll eventually be crushed, but not right away. It's building up suspense. And Tracy comes in and they have a fight, but then the blank shows up and basically tries to tell Tracy that Tracy needs to kill Caprice, get Caprice out of the way, and then Tracy and the blank can run this town together. And the blank has a gun on Tracy, telling him to kill Caprice, but for whatever reason, Tracy knows that the blank isn't going to shoot him, and he walks over to the blank. Big Boy ends up shooting the blank. I think Dick Tracy shoots Caprice, and he falls into the gears somehow, into some bottomless pit, and he's gone.
We don't see him die. He actually just falls into just a black void, and I think this was ripe for a sequel.
I suppose you've got a good point there. But then we unmask the blank, and it turns out that blank face was really just a mask, and underneath it was Breathless Mahoney, aka Madonna. And that was like the one thing I remembered about this movie, that the person without a face is Madonna.
The only two things I remembered about this entire film was that Big Boy falls to his death in the gear room, and that the blank is Madonna. But the ending is, it's a pretty happy ending. Dick Tracy, you sort of assume that he gets together with Tess, and they also kind of adopt the kid, because the kid decides to take up a name. You want to tell them what he calls himself? It's really sweet.
I don't know if it's that sweet. Dick Tracy Jr. It's not that sweet because he like changes his name to Dick Tracy Jr. without ever asking Dick Tracy. Like, it seems kind of presumptuous.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it's not like he can change his name to Dick Tracy, like as an homage. It's like, I'm Dick Tracy, you're Dick Tracy, like the one that belongs to you. Like, take me home and, feed me. And, I have expensive tastes.
I mean, it's a pretty aggressive move when you think about it.
Well, he's a smart orphan then.
I guess so. I mean, he really didn't want to go to that orphanage.
I know. I mean, how could you imagine a kid not wanting to live in an orphanage, instead wanting to live with a loving two parental units?
I guess. And that is the end of the movie. So, James, what are your thoughts? Does Dick Tracy stand the test of time?
This movie it's one of the few movies I've seen where the cinematography, it's absolutely beautiful. I think it's so well shot. It's so classic. The matte films, it's really the last of those kind of films because there's no CGI in this one. Danny Elfman's score is awesome. I mean, it's a little bit too reminiscent of Batman, but it just has this blockbuster summer film feel to it, which was really fun. I like that Dick Tracy, as opposed to, say, Batman in the last few films, Dick Tracy's really a detective. I really like that. He kind of uses tweezers. He picks something up and he's like, based on this dirt, it was here. And I think the cast is great. You got all these people. I think they're all fun in it. The makeup is fantastic. If not a little ridiculous, but it's supposed to look ridiculous. Like, CGI would make it different, but this is just supposed to look like an animated character brought to real life. I also want to say that Madonna, she acts wonderfully in this film. If you were to make a live remake of Jessica Rabbit, I think a 1990 Madonna from this film with a wig would do it justice. I think she's very good with what she has here. And I think Warren Beatty, he's kind of this gravitas detective. He's a gritty, he's that cop that, dames and all that stuff. And he says it without it being, offensive. Whereas when the kid says dames, you're like, hey, kid, watch your mouth.
Really? I think it's the opposite.
Well, in the beginning, the kid's like, I don't like dames.
And it's cute because he's a kid.
Yeah, okay, fine. Because in the end, I guess he's like, you're a dame that I like. But right. Fine. All that being said, the only thing missing is just one small thing. And that's a good screenplay, like a good plot. I found the film just so uninteresting. I wish it was better. Even the little lounge numbers with Madonna, and there's a lot of these dance numbers that kind of remind me, if you've seen like The Fabulous Mrs. Maisel, all these like 1930s kind of ensembles. It's really fun, but I'm just incredibly bored. The blank makes no sense. It's not a well thought out character. Maybe the 2-hour, 15-minute film does actually answer some of the questions, but I just kept finding myself like a little confused. But it's a film that I had not seen in 30 years, and Dick Tracy's entire thing was calling Dick Tracy. And that's the thing. Imagine calling someone, wait, but he's not by a telephone. I mean, you have to suspend that belief. And I mean, it's a little bit too late. This film should have been made maybe in like 1980. I mean, it still would have been as confusing, but I think it would have been received a lot better. I think this film just to me just isn't good enough. It doesn't stand the test of time. What do you think, Al?
Well, I certainly agree with you in terms of the plot and specifically the blank's plan. I kind of get what they're going for, which is that Breathless wants to seduce Dick Tracy. She's in love with him, but because he is rebuffing her, she decides to get him out of the picture. And the way she wants to do that is not by killing him, but by framing him. So that way he won't be dead, but it's sort of that hell hath no fury, like a woman scorned thing. It kind of makes sense, but not really all that much, because if she loves Dick Tracy, why is she so viciously going after him and his girlfriend and everything that he loves? And like, we didn't really get into all the specifics, but she's framing him for the murder of the police chief. I mean, if found guilty, he would rot in jail for the rest of his life. I mean, yikes. But at the end, she totally feels bad for it and is like, oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to get a kiss. Also, why is she in love with him? Like, at first, it just seems like she's infatuated with him, flirting with him, but like, they never date. They never have any like real conversations that aren't just about her trying to seduce him. It really doesn't hold up to any scrutiny at all. We talked about the incredible cast in this movie, and like you were saying, yeah, it was probably fun for a lot of these guys to just show up and hang out on a set with their pal Warren Beatty. I get that, but it still just kind of felt to me like a waste of talent. Dustin Hoffman, who is an Oscar winner, I mean, he won for Rain Man. He has a couple of scenes. Dick Van Dyke has a couple of lines. Kathy Bates, you barely even know that it's her as the stenographer. I mean, does she even have a line? Maybe she has like one or two. Mandy Patinkin is unrecognizable. Paul Sorvino, James Caan, Catherine O'Hara. I saw her name on IMDb. I don't even know who she was in this movie. Like, I get it that these people are meant to look like they're from a comic strip, but it just kind of seems like a waste of A-list talent to me. One thing that I guess was kind of ahead of its time is the whole watch that you can talk into. Do you have an Apple Watch or a smartwatch?
I used one for a little bit. It was fun. But how come they didn't do an origin story for the walkie-talkie? Why didn't they present it to him and say, you're the best detective on the force. You're going to be the only person. It's brand new. They never explained that.
It was a little bit ahead of its time, though, because in the 1930s, the idea of someone being able to communicate with someone by talking into their watch was this completely miraculous idea. And even when this movie came out 30 years ago, that was not a thing. But now I have a smartwatch. I can talk into it. I mean, it kind of look like a tool when I do it, but it's a thing that people have and that people do. One other thing that I think this movie did start a mini trend in the 90s was a couple other movies that take place in the 1930s. I can really only think of two others, but The Shadow, which was based on a radio serial and starred Alec Baldwin, and The Rocketeer, which I think also took place in the 1930s. Why was there an obsession of the 1930s in the 1990s? But there were at least those three movies.
There were a couple, actually. The Green Mile, that was also the 30s. The Phantom, remember that one?
Oh, yes, right, which was also a comic strip.
Yeah, they did Of Mice and Men. I don't know if you remember that. That's a 30s film.
Oh, okay. But there's something about the style of this movie and, you know, the colors and the matte paintings that while it does look pretty cool, that hasn't stood the test of time. I think it would just look weird today. I mean, I get that they were going for something really unique and stylistic, but the look doesn't stand the test of time. The plot doesn't stand the test of time. And overall, I didn't love this movie. And I think, you know, also the fact that it didn't become a franchise and people weren't that into it. I mean, why would a 10-year-old in 1990 be obsessed with something from the 1930s? It doesn't really make a ton of sense. I'm going to say that it doesn't stand the test of time. It just doesn't hold up. But next week,
Jaws!
Yeah, we're going to go from the summer blockbuster of 1990 to the summer blockbuster of 1975. It's a great movie to do as summer's starting, Jaws. I already can think of ways that this movie is timely now. This is a movie that put Steven Spielberg on the map. It made people afraid to go in the ocean. Jaws. I'm really excited to watch this one again. In the meantime, as always, we want to hear from you at Tested Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. What are your memories of Dick Tracy, if you have any? When you see someone talking into their watch, are you like, you're kind of a tool? I mean, you do kind of look like a tool doing it, but it is really fun. And yeah, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.